Staff, are we ready to start the meeting? The meeting's called to order. Natalie, may we have a roll call, please?
Chairperson Phil Goldstein.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jost.
Here.
Commissioner Lisa Bard. Here. Commissioner Tom Wood.
Here.
Commissioner Jeremy Holt.
Here.
Alternate Wendy Newland. Alternate Mike Lewis.
Here. Thank you. Commissioners, staff, any amendments to the agenda? Okay. Determination of alternate voting. We have all 5 regular commissioners here, so our alternate that's present will not vote. This is the opportunity. This is public comment, general public comment. This is an opportunity for anybody who wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda. Natalie, has anybody signed up for general public comment? And I'm not sure you'll know from that, but no, and anybody speak now or forever hold your peace. Sign up for general public. Okay, fine. We will close general public comment. Item number 5, the consent agenda consists solely of approval of the June 20th, 2023 meeting minutes. Commissioners, any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion on consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda is approved. We move on to our business items. A bit of protocol for anybody that's not familiar with our meeting conduct. We will first, staff will make a presentation introducing the subject and providing some background information. Commissioners may be asked to ask the staff to clarify anything. We will then turn it over to the applicant, who I understand will make a presentation. Applicant, you may or may not be aware of this. We'll ask you, when we get to public comment, ask you to take some notes on the public comment that will follow your presentation, and then we'll bring you back up after that to address things along with staff, attorneys if necessary, anybody else that we need to bring into the conversation. After the applicant makes their presentation, we will have public comment, and I'll get into the protocol on public comment when we get to that point. After we have public comment, we close public comment, and then the commissioners will have an opportunity after that to ask questions of staff, applicant, and others. And then I'll seek a motion on the business items. So with that, I'll turn it over to staff. Kevin, I believe you're making the presentation.
Thank you, Chairperson. This first item is the Ladera Plan Development Overlay Amendment. The owners, Connell LLC, represented tonight by Grant Nelson, applicants Galloway, represented tonight by Steve Weens. The PD overlay, this is just a little quick snapshot of where we're at, where this application kind of falls within the development review process. This is kind of one of the earlier ones. You'll notice it's before sketch plan, which is the next item on our agenda. But this is kind of one of the earlier framework items for the development that we have in the process. A PD overlay is modifications from the land use code. It's requests for some modifications to certain criteria within the land use code to allow for different types of developments, more unique type developments, and things along those lines. That is generally what a PD overlay sets up for. We've had quite a few come through town. Typically, there are things for setbacks, landscaping standards, things like that. That is normally within a PD overlay. The subject property is located south of Costco, south of Sweatsville Zoo Road, both on the east and west side of the existing Weitzel Street, roughly about 48 acres in size that we have. The base zoning of the property is already RC with the existing PD overlay on top. with this amendment that's being proposed here. This here is the PD overlay document that shows both the existing and the proposed changes. We've kind of highlighted the proposed changes that we have within the PD overlay amendment. Generally, the modifications are for certain sections of the land use code for relation to care facilities, floor area ratio, and then height, and then some buffering standards as well. There's also some modification on landscaping standards and tree size that are being requested as well. The first change is for the definition of a care facility. This is to remove a portion of our definition that restricts care for only 24 hours of a care facility. They are requesting that it would be allowed for up to 14 consecutive days. This way, they would have the ability to have different care facilities that require overnight care of a patient in their facilities. The floor area ratio changes would be for a lot intended for an indoor storage facility and then a lot intended for a hotel. The current land use code requirement for regional commercial has a floor area ratio of 0.5. Floor area ratio is how much square footage you can build on a lot. So let's just, for example, 10,000 square foot lot at 0.5, you'd be allowed to build 5,000 square feet of building on that lot. So the applicant's request is for increasing that floor area ratio just for 2 areas within the subdivision. The storage facility increase, they are requesting to be 1.55, and then the hotel would be an increase from 0.5 to 0.6. The other request on one of those lots would be a height increase for the intended hotel lot as well. The current maximum height allowance in regional commercial is 40 feet. The developer is asking for an increase to 65 feet just for that one specific area for a hotel user. The last major request in addition would be for landscape buffer standards. Currently, the buffer standards would be a buffer 50 to the county property is located to the north on the northeast side of the site due to the Sweatsville Zoo property currently being in unincorporated Larimer County with a rural designation. The applicant's request is to reduce that buffer to a buffer 10 due to the fact that our comp plan does call out for the portion that abuts that kind of northeast portion of the site to be regional employment, regional commercial, which would be the same as the existing property for this development. The other 2 modifications are generally towards landscaping. These were actually modifications that back through the process, staff saw some discrepancies, and we felt it would be best to capitalize on making some changes to this based on current landscaping requirements. So the first one is for tree caliper size at planting. Staff is over the years have seen that there are certain tree caliper sizes that are a little bit more difficult to get in mass quantity for developments at tree nurseries and things like that. So with that, it's since it's harder to find some of these tree sizes, staff is allowing for smaller tree sizes to be planted and then grow, just because the inventory of these larger trees at initial planting are very hard to come by throughout the region and even the state that we have found. And then the other is just a tweak on language in relation to the preservation of trees on site that are deemed to be needed to be preserved. approved. The PD overlay does not require a neighborhood meeting for the process, but the developers did request that they have a voluntary meeting to gather feedback from residents. That meeting was held on June 14th, and that observation report is attached. With that, I can answer any questions that you may have or.
Good. Commissioners, anything you'd like Kevin to clarify before we turn it over to the developers for their presentation of item 6A, the Ladera planned development overlay amendment? Commissioners, any clarification? Marty.
One for me, it'd be helpful to see or to go through just kind of the rationale for some of these things, you know, why you all put these forward as, you know, necessary.
The only two that staff put forward as a request were the two for the trees and the landscape, and the others were from the developer. So that would be best answered from them for their rationale for needing these changes. These are requests by the developer.
I guess, is the staff recommendation?
Staff recommendation is for approval of these.
Yeah.
With that, so staff is comfortable with these changes due to the nature of a lot of these developments and the types of users that do come within, you know, regional commercial developments. Hotels, you know, specifically, they do need a little bit larger floor area ratio. Indoor storage specifically needs those larger floor area ratios just to get the additional square footage that's needed. The other ones, you know, like the care facility going from 24 hours to 14, you know, days. Staff doesn't see that as a significant change just because it does allow for different types of care facilities, and the developer can kind of touch on that a little bit more with the types of facility that they're looking for from that standpoint. And then the height to get a reasonable size hotel, generally with a 40-foot height, you would be limiting to a roughly a 2-story hotel at 40 feet, just because of the change of, you know, architecture. These days typically have 11 feet from plate to plate. And then a lot of the times lobbies are 14 feet high, things like that. So at that standpoint, you'd be really limiting yourself with the screening of, you know, rooftop mechanicals to a 2-story hotel, which, you know, really doesn't attract many of the hotel users, you know, from that standpoint.
Okay. All right.
I do have, Kevin, am I correct? We understand that these are amendments to the PD overlay. These are not variances per se. Did I understand that this has been whittled down considerably from an original higher number of amendments? That is a different PD overlay. These requests were specific to this PD overlay from the applicant. For this one, what you're thinking of is a different PD overlay application that's in staff process right now, but this one specifically were these specific items. Okay, very good. So commissioners, any, Lisa, Mike, put your microphone. Here you go.
Are you saying then that there is an additional PD overlay that is going to come for this development that's now currently with staff review?
There is a PD overlay that is in the review process that will come for the additional remainder of the property.
So it will not affect these particular lots at this
Nope.
PD overlay. It will affect the other lots.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, anything you wanted to clarify? Anybody else?
I'm okay.
Want clarification? Okay, with that, we can now turn it over to the applicant for their comments, please. And if you could state your name and your position. Is your microphone on? There's where the little graphic of somebody speaking is. There you go. Thank you.
Testing. Can
And
you hear
yeah,
me now?
Yeah, and if you could speak close to the microphone so the thousands of people out there watching us will be able to hear what you're saying.
All my TikTok followers. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, town staff, and members of the public. My name is Carolyn White. I'm the Land Use Counsel for the applicant, which is Connell LLC, and our project is called Ladera. As you know, Ladera is located just south of East Harmony Road, west of South County Road 5, north of Kector Road, and east of I-25. So just orienting you a little bit here. I want to mention one thing. We actually had prepared our PD overlay and sketch plan presentation as a single presentation and kind of go back and forth explaining how they relate to each other. And after conferring with the town attorney, it was concluded that we ought to just go ahead and deliver the presentation that way, even though you've got it broken up into two separate hearings. And then when we get to the second hearing, I'll just get up here and say everything we said before is incorporated, so you don't have to hear it twice.
Commissioners, you all right with that?
Yes.
I'm okay with that. If you are, staff obviously is. Okay, thanks,
Yeah, we're
Carolyn.
comfortable with that. Thanks. Okay, so because there have been a lot of questions about this project, and Commissioner Bard, you just asked one, which is, hey, what about all those other PD overlay amendments? That's a different application. And so part of what we felt was necessary to do tonight was do a little orientation and explain to you how this fits in the big picture of all the things that are potentially happening, both now, in the past, and in the future with this property. So along those lines, the town annexed this property right here that we're talking about tonight and approved the initial PD overlay for the 63 acres that was originally annexed back in October of 2021. What we're here for tonight is two components, two approvals related to a portion of that which was previously annexed, the PD overlay amendment and a sketch plan. And those two things apply to an approximately 48.84 acre area. So you might be asking, why did we annex 63 acres and you're only here tonight talking to us about 48 acres? And the reason is that some portions of that which was already annexed are not part of this application tonight. That's the floor and decor, which is in the dark blue on that map. And that's Weitzel Street, which is in red on that map. So what we're talking about is the portion of Weitzel that's included, which is the light blue, and then the green. That's what we're talking about tonight. That's part of tonight's application, sketch plan, and PD overlay. The entirety of Weitzel Street has been dedicated to the town in a separate process. So we've got our PD overlay amendment, we've got Weitzel Street. And so we're going to be discussing those two things. Let's see, and how each application meets the criteria in the land use code. We are not here tonight talking about specific users, specific site plans. We're not here talking about the other 180 acres that is an annexation application that's pending, that is not before you yet, although it will come before you eventually, we hope. And we're not talking about the zoning, which is that other PD overlay that was mentioned a moment ago that applies to the other 180 acres, which is on that map, but it's not colored in. So it's not part of tonight. So all those things will come forward and we'll talk about them in due time. So this is just a little summary slide. What has been previously approved, far left column, what we're talking about tonight, the sketch plan and the PD overlay only as to that 48.8 acres. And then things that have been submitted that are under town review that will come before you in the future. That's the preliminary plat for this property, the annexation for the rest of the property, the rezoning for the rest of the property, and the planned development overlay for the rest of the property. All that is in the future. So I know the Planning Commission knows this, but for the benefit of the public, this step tonight, this sketch plan is step one in a 3-step process of carving the property up into parcels for development. So it's called the sketch plan. It then comes the preliminary plat and then comes the final plat. Both of those will eventually come before you. We have already actually submitted the preliminary plat and it is also pending staff review, as was mentioned. In addition to the sketch plan, we're asking you to approve an amendment to the existing plan development overlay. And the plan development overlay, as you all know, essentially creates a new zoning district on top of the existing zoning district, which is RC. and has the ability to modify certain of the town standards in order to allow for more creative, more innovative opportunity for development, particularly whereas here you have a very large area and you want it to be planned in an integrated and holistic way. Doing the PD overlay allows everything to be designed so that it fits together rather than piecemeal one at a time. And that's exactly what we're proposing to do here. So first, I'd like to invite Jenny Romano from Galloway up here to give you a walk through the sketch plan, what's in it, what these different planning areas are.
Thank you, Carolyn, and good evening to you all. The sketch plan proposes to create 7 separate planning areas, all to remain zoned as regional commercial. The proposed principal uses in the sketch plan are permitted per the land use code and within the regional commercial zone district. The principal use on planning area 1, which is kind of top center of this page, the principal use is industrial. The principal use of planning area 4, that area to the right, is open space, while the principal uses for the remainder of the planning areas 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 are all to be business, commercial, and or retail. The density on each planning area ranges from 0.25 to 1.6. We'll discuss some of these densities in a little bit more detail when we go to discuss the PD overlay amendment. This sketch plan depicts open space and tree lawn areas along the public roadways. These areas will include multi-use pathways and open space areas for recreational opportunities. The open space proposed in the sketch plan is more than 2.6 times the 20% open space required per the land use code at 53% total landscape of this total acreage. The additional open space for Ladera will be provided in future phases of development as well. Now I'm going to turn it over to Steve Weens with Stack Lot to talk more about the PD overlay amendment.
This one?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Which one was it, Carolyn? Good evening. My name is Steve Weens. As Jenny mentioned, I'm with the firm Stack Lot. We serve as landscape architecture and urban planning for the project, and I'm here to present on the PD overlay changes that we made to the original approved PD overlay from September, I think it was September of 2021. This right here is showing the original documentation of what was approved back in 21. And this document, per what Kevin showed, I apologize, some of this is repetitive, but what Kevin shown was the 7 changes that we're requesting here. The changes we feel are minor. We're seeking these changes to encourage end users to locate to this property and also to accommodate some of the staff requested changes, which were mentioned about the landscape. A number of these changes, such as the landscape, are minute in our opinion. It's the change of the caliper and it's the word change. But I'm here to discuss with you 3 of the major changes that we're asking for with this PD overlay amendment. The first change in this PD overlay amendment is to increase the height of, on that plan, it's labeled C and D, and it's increased the height from 40 feet to 65 feet for a hotel. And that change is specific to that lot and specific to that type of use. We're asking for a 25-foot increase in the code, and it's for this lot only, as I mentioned. Any deviation, we feel like this deviation will have a minimal impact to the surrounding and adjacent properties. One, because the location of this is squarely in the middle of Ladera. And second is because of the topography of where this lot is located is lower than the majority of the town to the east of the lot. This is an example of just a rough example really quick of a 40-foot. And then it also explains that through the site planning process, we could ask for a 15% exception, taking it to 46 feet. But our final that we're requesting tonight is a 65-foot height, increasing it by 25 feet.
If you look at a typical hotel, and as Kevin mentioned, a typical hotel at 40 feet will get you 2 stories. The reason we're requesting this is we're asking for a 4-story hotel. And the additional item that I would add is that's also necessary just so that we can get the elevator, that goes above the last floor within that 65-foot range. There's many hotels within the Northern Colorado area, which are larger than this. And a good example is Embassy Suites, which ranges from 80 to 90 feet. These 2 renderings here are looking at the actual hotel that we're proposing. This is from the river. We're 0.22 miles away, and it's kind of hard to see, but if you can see where 0.22 miles is, you can see our hotel. And I apologize, I went too quick. And this one is from Sweatsville Zoo Road, looking across Flooring Decor, and we're 0.1 mile away on that one. And it's the hotel that we're proposing for this project. Next change, as Kevin mentioned, is we're asking for a floor area ratio to increase from 0.5 to 1.55. That's for lot 1, block 2, which on this plan is labeled B and E. And then we're also asking for the lot that's labeled C and D, the hotel, to increase the floor area ratio from 0.5 to 0.6. Proposed density I'd like to point out is located along Weitzel Street. Weitzel is a major collector. And we feel that this density increase is appropriate along a major collector to once again have the ability to attract different users within the area and to meet the community's needs. Additionally, we feel that the design or the increase in density will be offset by the design standards that will apply to each property and the natural topography of the site. Oops, sorry, I'm not done, Carol. I'm just bad clicker. The final PD overlay amendment includes the decreased buffer on lot C and D on the north. And as Kevin mentioned, we're requesting this to comply with a future condition of what the comprehensive plan calls for that unannexed land to be regional commercial in the future, and therefore it'd be a 10-foot buffer in the future. And I'll now turn it back over to Carolyn, and she's going to go through, discuss how both applications comply with criteria of the land use code.
Hey, you want your water, Steve? Right, thank you very much. So now you have the overview of what's in these 2 applications, and my task is to link them back to the land use code criteria. So we'll start with the sketch plan first, and I want to also mention that you have 2 letters from us in your packet. One is a letter that was written in response to a letter of opposition addressing the issues and concerns and allegations that were raised in that letter. And the other one is a letter that goes through in great detail, much more detail than I'm going to tonight, about how these applications meet all of the criteria in the land use code for sketch plan approval and for a PD overlay. So I'm not going to go through that same amount of detail, but there's a couple key things that we wanted to highlight for you tonight. So obviously the sketch plan has criteria for, the land use code has criteria for how you approve a sketch plan and when you approve it. These are the 4 criteria repeated up here. I won't read them to you, but our proposed sketch plan is consistent with the land use code. It furthers numerous comprehensive plan goals set forth in the comprehensive plan. We actually had so many to list that we had an appendix attached in our letter of all the comprehensive plan goals that are furthered by the sketch plan. It's also worth noting that if you look at a comprehensive plan, no single development probably meets every single goal. Rather, different developments fulfill different types of goals in the comprehensive plan. In fact, some comprehensive plan goals are inherently in conflict. So let's talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan goals and policies. Some of the key ones we think are furthered by this development include things like balancing large-scale economic generators and neighborhood-oriented local businesses to create a supported small-town economy. One of the points of this large-scale master plan community that we're talking about here is to really customize it for this location so that it provides this mix of opportunities for different types of businesses to locate there. And that's one reason why we're proposing some of these specific changes that we are. Create an expansive and accessible system of parks, open space, and greenway corridors that serve as the overall foundation and framework for development. As was mentioned, we're proposing 2.6 times the amount of open space just in this one segment of the application alone. And obviously you'll see a bunch more when the rest of the application when the rest of the project comes before you, and cement the town's exceptional quality of life, open spaces, small town character, and vibrant sense of community. The development facilitated by the sketch plan is a necessary precursor to a well-designed project that will bring together revenue generating uses, open space and residential uses to create this kind of vibrant community where people can live, work, and play. Two examples of how the sketch plan has been designed to mitigate potential impacts on adjacent properties are number one, traffic, and number two, the site layout and how we've positioned which types of uses are going to go where on the site, why we chose the parcel that we chose for the potential hotel use that will be slightly taller than everything else. So the site's layout will help mitigate potential adverse impacts because adjacent development is somewhat limited because of the floodplain and the highway. And the property's topography will minimize the impact on people's views, as you just saw in some of those renderings about how the property will be viewed from adjacent properties. Although traffic is not necessarily a criterion for a sketch plan, taking into account how traffic would be mitigated was certainly part of the thought behind what's being proposed for you tonight. The applicant has definitely considered it throughout the entitlement process. In connection with the preliminary plat, which will be before you later, the applicant's traffic engineer has determined that the level of service will remain constant and that projected traffic levels are in compliance with the original traffic study that was submitted when this property was annexed back in October of 2021. Also, the improvements to Weitzel Street that the applicant has already built, which were built really oversizing in advance of the rest of the development, because what's already been annexed and built would not have required all of that, have already begun to contribute to alleviating traffic congestion in the vicinity and will further do so as the rest of the project builds out. The applicant also considered a variety of other impacts: drainage, stormwater, water supply, potable and irrigation, and floodplain for these applications, and all of the necessary reports are in the packet and staff has had the opportunity to review them. We're not going to talk about them tonight, but if you have questions, we're happy to answer them. Therefore, all of the criteria for a sketch plan have indeed been met with this application. So let me briefly just run through the same exercise for the criteria for a PD overlay, the zoning component of this. You have a few more criteria. You've got 7 criteria for a PD overlay instead of just 4. For a PD overlay, there's actually 2 sets of criteria that are potentially applicable here. You've got PD overlay criteria, and then you've got rezoning criteria, because when we amend existing zoning in a PD overlay, we're functionally rezoning it. So we're going to talk a little bit about both sets of criteria. These are the rezoning criteria. Of these, you really only need 1. We're not correcting an error. There's some changed conditions, certainly, but what we're focusing on is the 6th criterion, which is accommodating a development with innovative and creative design and help to promote a mix of land uses within the development. And that's exactly what this development is designed to do and what our proposed changes to the PD overlay are designed to do. Another unique feature that the amendment will accommodate is a much needed hotel in Timnath. This is a use that is needed to serve the community. It will be conveniently located near retail, near residential, hospitality, and open space uses within the confines of this holistically designed development. So that's the criterion that we meet. And then there's also the PD overlay criteria. You've got 5 of those. Again, I won't read them to you, but the detailed information about how all these criteria are met is contained in that longer letter. But just a couple things to mention: there will not be adverse effects on adjacent properties or the health, safety, and welfare of the owners or occupants of those surrounding properties. As you heard during the discussion of the sketch plan, there were a whole number of different studies performed in order to evaluate those kinds of things like drainage and floodplain and so on. And in addition to all of the reports that were performed in conjunction with that original annexation. One comment that we have heard questions about from the public at both the required open house and the extra voluntary open house had to do with wildlife, which is actually not a criterion at this stage of the process. But nonetheless, because it did come up during the annexation, the applicant did have a wildlife study performed. That study is in your packet. It is something that the applicant is very focused on and cares a lot about. And they have had some meetings with CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, in order to evaluate the situation as it relates to potential wildlife habitat in this vicinity. And certainly, to the extent necessary and appropriate, any construction requirements imposed by CPW or the law will be followed as this project unfolds. None of those are really applicable at this stage of the process, but I want the commission to know that it's not something that the applicant takes lightly. It's something they care about and take very seriously. This development will be unlike anything else in Timnath. It will have all these different uses integrated around the central spine of Weitzel Road in a well-designed area with trails and open space that has both commercial and residential uses right up against the highway, sort of buffering the rest of the town from the highway, but also inviting people in from the highway to partake of some of the regional commercial opportunities that will be there. That's exactly what the town's comprehensive plan envisions for this location. And therefore, we want to emphasize that the fact that we're seeking these few minor modifications to the PD overlay as it was originally approved do not at all mean that it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. And as we've elaborated in detail in the letter, it is indeed consistent with the comprehensive plan. And these changes are needed to further make it consistent in order to be able to fulfill that vision. You know, we always hoped we'd be able to get a hotel here. We didn't know for sure we'd be able to, but if you want one, you're not going to get one that's only going to be 2 stories and fit within the 40-foot height, as Kevin Coble pointed out. So to accommodate the prototype of that type of use, we need to request an additional modification to the height. And you'll see other potential modifications like that come forward in the secondary part of this. So therefore, all of these criteria are met for the PD overlay. All of the criteria for both the sketch plan and the PD overlay are met, and we therefore ask for your favorable recommendation for both of these applications. We've got our whole team here to answer any questions that you may have, and really appreciate your time and attention to our presentation this evening. I know it was a little longer than you expected since we combined them together.
Thanks, Carolyn. Kevin, I understand, obviously they've already presented their sketch plan. We'll be circling back to you on whatever else you would add.
Correct.
In way of introducing after we've already heard their presentation on this. I understand that we'll come back to that, and we are considering and voting on these separately, including separate public comment on these. Although I suspect we may hear in public comment, somebody may wish to comment on both, but all right, is that acceptable?
Yep, that's correct. And I do want to clarify one thing. So the application in front of you is a plan development overlay. We have specific criteria for a plan development overlay versus a rezoning. The rezoning criteria is for a map amendment. This is a plan development overlay. So the criteria that you all are reviewing this against is the plan development overlay criteria, which is those criteria 1 through 5 that are listed in the staff report. From that standpoint, and staff did review the PD overlay against that criteria and found that the PD overlay does meet the criteria that's listed under the PD overlay criteria within that.
Okay, I had a feeling you'd clarify that.
Yep.
Commissioners, any questions on Kevin on that particular point? Okay, so we're going to proceed with public comment on this. Carolyn and the team, as I mentioned, if you could be taking notes on this. After we close public comment, I will ask you to come back up, whomever or all of you to come back up. We may not be able to address every aspect of public comment, but we'll do the best we can. We may lob something over to staff. We may lob it over to town attorneys, but we'll try to do the best. So if you could keep those notes and you'll refer to those notes and go through point by point. Public comment, okay? You see 3 little lights up on the podium, which we have working now. I understand we tested them out earlier. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes and 3 minutes only. Natalie, I understand we have the yellow light comes on when there's 30 seconds left. I'll give you the timeout sign when we get to that point. And we will, at that point, ask you to please cease your comment. We expect civility. I have no reason to assume we will not have that, but would appreciate it. Also appreciate no outbursts, if you will, or displays of emotion on what is obviously for some an emotional topic. I will add this. It has been part of the town protocol at some point, to ask those who are offering public comment, if all you're doing is echoing the sentiment of somebody before you, we ask you to designate a representative. I'm not inclined to do that. I would prefer to allow everybody 3 minutes if they wish to speak, and we'll do that whether it's redundant or not. But do ask you in the interest of time, if it is redundant, to consider that. And lastly, once we close public comment, it goes without saying, public comment is closed despite whatever conversation ensues between commissioners, staff, attorneys, and everybody else. There will be no additional public comment on that. So Natalie, and I know you've got on your list some people maybe are not, but why don't you go through that list? And we now are opening public comment.
Okay. My name is Christy Briles.
All right, hang on a second. Natalie, make sure your microphone's on so we know the names of the people. And then, and I believe you were about to do this. If you would state your name and address, please.
Hey, my name is Christy Briles. My address is 5178 Single Tree Drive, and I live in Loveland. Okay. I'm proudly serve as the Executive Director of Respite Care. While you may not have personal experience with disabilities, chances are many of you know someone who does. In fact, it is estimated that 10 to 12% of children in Northern Colorado have a diagnosed disability. As a nonprofit organization based in Northern Colorado, our primary focus is providing short-term, high-quality care for children with developmental disabilities while offering respite to their families. Our comprehensive range of services at our facility include early childhood care, before and after school care, evening care, summer day camps, weekend programs, wilderness camp, which I just got back from, and extended overnight stays of up to 14 days. To accomplish our mission, we have a dedicated team of up to 68 staff, depending on the time of year, an incredible network of over 800 volunteers, and a supportive community, including individuals that are sitting behind me, and also the Connells. Currently, we are proud to serve over 140 families in Larimer and now Weld counties, ensuring that each child receives the specialized care they need. Tonight, I stand before you to formally request your approval for an overnight variance that would allow respite care to move forward with our due diligence to establish a potential site in the Ladera development. I sincerely hope that each of you will grant your approval, enabling us to expedite the development process and determine if Timnath and the Ladera development will be the next home for respite care. The location of Ladera is particularly important for us because it is centrally located. It is easily accessible to the families of the children we currently serve and the additional families we hope to attract. By having a facility in Ladera, we can ensure that our services are conveniently available to those who need them the most, easing the burden on families and caregivers in Northern Colorado. Overnights at Respite Care provide essential respite for caregivers, offering them a break and promoting their well-being. They provide peace of mind for families knowing their child is a safe environment. Families use our overnight program to take a night off, attend a concert, or if they have surgery, go to a wedding, or just a good night of sleep. By approving the overnight variance, you would not only be supporting the growth and development of Ladera, but also making a significant difference in the lives of children with developmental disabilities and their families. I trust in your wisdom and compassion and humbly ask for your approval to move the process forward in a timely manner. Respite Care sincerely believes that by embracing our organization, Timnath has the opportunity to demonstrate the significance of fostering an inclusive and supportive community. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Natalie, who's next?
Bill Jenkins. Bill Jenkins.
Bill Jenkins.
Good evening. My name is Bill Jenkins, 5507 Sugarloaf Court. On behalf of Guide Our Growth, I want to specifically respond to the recent criticism that we've received from Ladera and its representatives regarding this rezoning application. Guide Our Growth is not anti-growth, and we have no intention of driving growth into the ground. Rather, we're asking for two things: transparency and smart, sustainable growth. With respect to transparency, we initially struggled to locate any information regarding this proposed rezoning. To this day, there is still limited information about this proposal on the town's website, and we've never seen an application or project summary for this rezoning proposal. Initially, Ladera refused to schedule a neighborhood meeting for this rezoning. They eventually did so, but only after our attorney pointed out the town land use code requires a neighborhood meeting for all rezonings. At the neighborhood meeting last month, we learned for the first time that the current rezoning proposal is only seeking to make a handful of changes beyond what was previously approved at the time of annexation in October of 21. In light of this, Guide Our Growth land use attorney submitted a new letter regarding the rezoning dated July 11th, which is included in your hearing packet. Now that we finally have some transparency about this proposal, we nevertheless remain concerned that these specific changes are not in line with the vision that Ladera has tried to sell for this project. Both the hotel height increase and the requested increases in floor area ratios to accommodate a chain hotel and a larger indoor storage facility will not do anything to create a vibrant, mixed-use, pedestrian-friendly destination. The increased density will create additional traffic without providing for additional improvements, multimodal transportation options, or additional public amenities. Each of these changes go far beyond what is otherwise allowed in the regional commercial zone. Before Timnath approves this request to allow for more commercial sprawl along I-25 at the gateway to town, we're asking the town to re-examine this entire project to ensure that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the broader vision that we all share for our unique community. Because such a comprehensive review has still never happened, we're asking the commission to recommend the denial of this rezoning request. Ladera should be held to the zoning rules that it requested for this site less than 2 years ago, and there's no basis for further relaxation of the regional commercial land use rules for this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Natalie?
Irv Christie.
Hello, my name is Irvin Christie. I'm at 5821 River Bluff Drive in Timnath Ranch. I'm here tonight to ask the Planning Commission to adhere to our existing height restrictions for the proposed hotel located in the Ladera development. I'm also a citizen and member of the Guide Our Growth team, and I'm in favor of thoughtful growth that's in line with the comprehensive plan. In response to the recent Amendment 1A election, the Connell family stated publicly, we're also committed to designing a project that is in accordance with the town's comprehensive plan. Ladera's sketch plan from the January 11th, 2023 stated the intent of the design is to integrate an upscale, walkable commercial development serving the town of Timnath and the greater region. The developer's request to allow a hotel with a height of 65 feet is 62% above the current land use code, hardly a minor change. During the neighborhood meeting, the developer claimed the hospitality vendors do not have a model that fits within the allowable height. This appears not to be true. A simple online search showed a Candlewood Suites, a Summerfield Suites that have 3-story plans, including locations in Fort Collins and Denver. I don't believe the developers tried hard enough to find a tenant with a 3-story plan. The second concern is regarding the brand of the hotel. I'm a frequent business traveler with over 1 million miles on United and multiple elite status and hotel programs around the world. Ladera's website claims they'll be bringing best-in-class food, beverage, entertainment, fitness, and retail options for residents to enjoy. In the neighborhood meeting, the Ladera team stated that a La Quinta and a Wyndham extended stay hotel were planned for the location. In a 2022 hotel ranking of 9 major national brands, La Quinta ranked number 8 out of 9 hotel brands. Based on 8,100 responses, they were ahead of only Motel 6. In another ranking of top 50 hotel chains, La Quinta ranked number 41 out of 50. This does not align well with the best-in-class claim that Ladera is making. If the hotels appeal to business travelers, what I think is absolutely critical, it must also have a top-rated loyalty program. In a recent hospitality study, 82% of business travelers said that the loyalty program had the major influence on what hotel chain they chose to stay at. Frequent travelers like myself will choose from Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton, or IHG hotels as their preferred place to use. My final question is to the Planning Commission is why have land use codes at all if the Planning Commission simply rubber stamps the proposal from the developers? My research showed that Ladera was already granted 28 variances on this property less than 2 years ago. For all the reasons I've outlined, excessive height, low hotel ranking, the constant stream of developer variance requests, please hold Ladera to their best-in-class commitment. The comprehensive plan is for Timnath to be different from every other wide spot in the road, with nothing but unimaginative chain retail outlets greeting people flowing through for cheap gas and cheap goods. The location along the Pooter gives us a unique opportunity to realize a town vision of a historic town. There are hospitality solutions out there that would fit with the land use codes and still provide a best-in-class
Time,
experience.
Irvin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie?
Brian Eubank?
Brian, I think you turned the microphone off. There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Back on it. Yeah, I'm Brian Eubank. My address is 2806 Cherrystone Place. I actually live in Fort Collins, but I'm here to support respite care with the variance of the overnight stays. I work at the Neenan Company. David Neenan has been involved with respite care for many years. I started when I first became involved with respite care was in 2011. At that time, I had two healthy children, 1 9 and 1 4. And I was so unaware of the needs of the special needs children or the families that need respite care. And so I'm here to just express that the care that they bring is authentic, it's genuine by their hearts. And to be able to come to this Ladera community for them, they need to be able to provide the overnight care for these families so they can have weekends away, different things to build you become accustomed to having a babysitter that's down the street that I can call up. Some of these families cannot do that, even calling their grandparents and saying, will you take care of my kid overnight? They can't do it because of the care that these kids need that is beyond what traditional families or the needs that our traditional families need. So I just want to be able to support respite care and the overnights that they need. It's a great community supported effort. They've supported Larimer County for many years, and they're trying to expand into Weld County to bring all communities together. There's many needs that are beyond the walls of each county. It's as you look around and start to become more aware of what's in our culture and environment and the needs that are supported. Yeah, if you ever have a chance, please go to respite care. See how heartwarming and it fills their staff, the joy of these families. So with that, I just want to express that to bring respite care here.
Thanks,
we need
Brian.
your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie?
Rebecca Rogers.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Rebecca Rogers, and I am attending today not just as an interested citizen, but as a very passionate mother.
Rebecca, excuse me, pull that microphone down a little bit.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
As a passionate mother navigating an entirely distinctive parenting demographic in the world of special needs and disabilities, I'm here to advocate for the proposed overnight variance for respite care that will greatly impact not only the lives of my 2 high needs boys, one of which has significant lifelong disabilities, but that of many parents that I've had the honor to cross paths with who share the same unique challenges as our family. As parents, we strive to provide the best possible life for all of our children. I have 6, and we work hard, not only just to provide for their basic needs, but to ensure that they have every opportunity to thrive and grow to each of their fullest potentials. However, when you have children with higher needs and disabilities, the challenges are more often overwhelming. We face many ever-changing obstacles that require additional supports and resources that are more often than not few to find. Respite care has been a lifeline for our family. They provide not only a much needed worry-free breather for my husband and I, and allows us to work and focus on other insignificant or significant responsibilities. But even more importantly, it has allowed our boys to experience new environments they would otherwise not have the opportunity that their typical peers would. It allows them to socialize with trained caregivers who understand not only their specialized needs, but have so lovingly cared enough to become personally invested and familiar with each of them and their many independent quirks. To be certain that our boys are well known and exceptionally cared for has brought immense peace of mind to my husband and I, and allows for total rest when we need it the most. It's given my boys the chance to gain independence, develop skills, and build relationships with both peers and other caring adults. The staff at Respite Care enthusiastically greets and receives each of my boys as though they are fully able, not disabled. I didn't mean to get emotional. The attitude of inclusiveness and normalcy has empowered my sons to feel such confidence and pride in who they are and what they are capable of when they have no power over their diagnoses. Respite Care is an extraordinary, one-of-a-kind, truly specialized facility. There is none other like it. It's essential for our entire family's well-being, and it plays a vital role in my
Wrap it up
boys'
if you could, please,
overall.
Rebecca. Sorry, but
I'm sorry.
wrap it up if you could.
Yes,
please.
I'm almost there.
Thank you.
Okay. So many families like ours are left without the support we desperately need. We find ourselves struggling to balance the demands of work, marriage, family, caring for our high needs children, and let alone finding any time to recharge. It takes its toll. And there's a surprising number
Rebecca,
of families.
I'm sorry, but I'm sorry,
Okay.
I know this
All
is
right.
near and
Yeah.
dear to you especially, but I'll give you a couple more
Okay.
seconds if you can wrap it up, please.
Um,
It's only fair to the other public.
No,
comment.
I understand. I'm sorry. I think you get the gist of where I'm going with that. Respite Care would be a great addition to your community.
Thanks.
And could you
Appreciate
state your address for the record real quick?
Yes.
Thank you.
1975 Covered Bridge Parkway, Windsor.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks. Natalie,
Dan Etheridge.
Is it off? Okay, that's okay.
now Dan, raise that up. So
Oh, yeah.
a little
sure.
higher. There you go.
Hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Good evening. My name's Dan Etheridge and I reside at 5765 Isabella Avenue in the Trailside neighborhood. I am a member of the Guide Our Growth team as well, and I'm a strong proponent of thoughtful growth in our community that aligns with the land use codes, as well as the comprehensive plan and the I-25 corridor guidelines. I'd like to speak tonight regarding requests for land use density increases within the Ladera development. Per the PD overlay submitted by Ladera, requests have been made for land use density variances on both the proposed hotel lot as well as on the proposed storage facility lot. An increase of 20% has been requested for the hotel lot site from an existing land use code limit of floor area ratio of 0.5 to an FAR of 0.6. There is requested an increase for the proposed storage facility lot from existing land use code limit of an FAR of 0.5 to an FAR of 1.55. This is more than 3 times the current code limit. In addition, they are requesting a reduction in setback on the north side of the storage facility property from 20 feet to just 10 feet. The building will likely cover the majority of the lot with limited landscaping to soften the appearance. Increased density typically comes along with increased traffic, increased transportation needs, increased public amenities, increased emergency management issues, and increased utility requirements. Timnath's comprehensive plan calls for, quote, a historic town between the mountains and the plains with an exceptional quality of life, open spaces, small town character, and a vibrant sense of community. How do the requested variances fit into that vision? Increased density is the opposite of small town character. In 2021, the project PD overlay received 28 variances for this property. The developer should work within the framework already approved. I request the Planning Commission take the time to review the application thoroughly and consider the impact these variances will have on our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Natalie?
I think that is all. If there's anyone who signed up and I missed, please come forward.
Anybody else wish to speak that didn't sign up? Natalie Sheet.
I think we're
Okay, that's it. All right, good. We will now close public comment. Carolyn, you're going to come up and you'll come up first, and I see you taking careful notes there. In fact, all three of you look like taking notes. And if you would now, to the best of your ability, go down and whatever concerns you can address, we appreciate you doing so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Again, Carolyn White for the applicant, and I will, as you directed, just seek to address some of the comments and concerns and questions that were raised during public comment. I'm going to focus just on those that relate to one or more of the relevant land use criteria. And even though I know this is specifically about the PD overlay, since we presented on both the sketch plan and the PD overlay, I'll try to address both to the extent they were brought up.
Hang on one second, Kevin, by way of a clarification. We're going to need to, obviously, we're going to need to open up item 6B.
Yeah.
We're going to also open up public comment. Perhaps nobody else wants to speak on that, but we're going to go through that process too. So you're okay with Carolyn addressing
We'll
this?
do it all again.
Strictly, okay.
Yeah,
we
I
will.
would actually say if you want to focus your responses right now on the PD overlay, that makes the most sense. So this is this matter is one where you'll be asked to vote first on the resolution to, or actually not resolution, the recommendation for approval of the amendment to the PD overlay. And those, just to kind of go through the criteria again that you're looking at, those 5 criteria. The proposed planned development district will have a unified character throughout the district. The planned development district shall have no more adverse effects on health, safety, welfare of the surrounding property, or shall be no more injurious to property or improvements in the area than would any use generally permitted in the same district. Considering location, type, and height of building and structures, the type and extent of landscaping or screening of the site, and whether the proposed use is consistent with any policy of the comprehensive plan that encourages mixed use or densities. Second, adequate utilities shall be provided. 3, the proposed planned development district shall not substantially impair the appropriate use or development of the adjacent property. 4, no significant traffic issues are created. And 5, the planned development district results in a more efficient development, which may contain innovative and creative development. So as you're considering this, Planning Commission, I encourage you to focus on those 5 criteria. And I would encourage the applicant to especially respond in the context of whether the proposed comments meet those criteria and whether your application meets the criteria.
Very good. Thanks. Carolyn, you're all right with that? Okay.
Well, if I have to only address the comments that address one of those 5 criteria, I'm not sure there are too many that fall into that category, but I'll choose the 2 that I think might be most relevant, that at least address the issues I think we've all been talking about in the respective lawyer letters back and forth. The comment was made by Mr. Jenkins that generally speaking, allowing the additional height that's being proposed as part of the PD overlay and allowing the additional density that's being proposed by increasing the FAR in and of themselves are inconsistent with the concept of a walkable community. I don't think that's actually one of the criteria, but notwithstanding that, it doesn't, the fact that we're proposing height and additional density does not in and of itself make it inconsistent with walkability. In fact, most urban planners would tell you that one of the ways you encourage a more compact, walkable neighborhood is to allow additional height, which in turn allows additional density. And the differences that we're talking about here between 2 stories and 4 stories are certainly not going to turn this place into an urban city. It's going to turn it into that kind of compact, walkable neighborhood that we're trying to achieve by blending a mix of different uses together and achieving that innovative and creative development. So we simply disagree with the characterization that allowing additional height makes it not a walkable neighborhood, that makes it not a vibrant community, as was part of the goal of the original LDERA that was approved back in October 2021. And it was also implied, I think, by the last speaker that somehow it's improper to bring forward proposed additional changes to the PD overlay at this time, or really at any time, that once a development code is established, that no changes should ever be possible. Well, if that were the case, then you wouldn't have a process in your code with criteria for how one could propose changes. And in fact, we're exactly following that process and following the rules that the town has set forth for how and when one can propose changes to zoning that has been previously approved. When Ladera was originally annexed in 2021, the end users were not yet identified. We did not have interest from the community, from the market, and we didn't really have a good feel for what type of users would potentially be attracted to this site. We certainly had dreams and visions and ideals of who we thought would want to be here. But now since that time, and as this project has moved forward, we've had the opportunity to engage with valuable community partners like respite care, like a potential hotel user. I'm not going to talk about brands because we don't get to decide right here in this evening what kind of brands are going to be located here. But the point is, in order to achieve the vision that was set forth originally, yes, some of these changes are proposed. And the last thing that I want to mention relates to the comment about the setback on that northern boundary there. You know, one of the fundamental purposes of a setback in a zoning code or in our PD overlay that's custom to this site is to buffer different uses from each other. If uses are different, it might have differing impacts. One might be higher intensity, one might be lower intensity. You typically require greater setbacks. So between industrial and residential, between commercial and residential, you have greater setback requirements. In this particular case, one of the justifications, as you asked about at the beginning, for that reduced setback is that the uses which will be located next to each other here will be very similar. It will be the exact same zoning. And so the need to buffer those two types of uses, those two categories of uses from each other is really minimized in this location. And that's why we felt it would be appropriate to request a reduction in the setback in order to accommodate a proposed end user in that location. So all of the changes that are being proposed here are the minimum amount necessary to achieve what we're trying to achieve based on identified end users that have come forward or a class of users that have come forward. That's why there's only 7, and that's why some of these changes are very, very small. The change from 0.5 to 0.6 FAR is really a very, very small change in the grand scheme of things in terms of how much lot coverage it allows. It's the minimum necessary to achieve what's trying to be achieved on that particular lot. So with that, we ask for your favorable recommendation of the PD overlay. And of course, we're still happy to answer your questions if you have any about the project, about the criteria, or any of the issues that have come forward this evening.
All right, stay put just
I
for a moment. Carolyn Steffel, are you all right with how Carolyn White is addressed on behalf of Ladera?
I am, and you guys can ask her any additional questions if you feel like any comments haven't been addressed. You know, you're welcome as the planning commission to ask her any questions as well.
We certainly will. Okay, and with that, now per our meeting conduct protocol, we're going to bring it up here to the commissioners. Commissioners, I really don't need to say this, but I want to remind you, we're here. We are a recommending body. We're here to consider these proposals. We then make recommendations to council on these items. We're going to circle back and we're going to have item 6B yet and go through this process again. But we're here, and it goes without saying almost, we are considering these in a very narrow framework. This is a reminder to me as well to be unbiased and consider these in the context of their suitability with the land use code and the other guiding documents. So again, just as a reminder. So with that, I'm going to bring it up here. Questions for the applicant, questions for staff. Who wants to go first? Marty?
Should we just ask, we're just going to ask all our questions. We're not going to take this topic by topic, right?
Well, we can do it however you want. It's your prerogative, but whatever you're comfortable with. I'd be remiss to my colleagues here and not having you address it.
I would rather ask all my questions. Go ahead.
Is that okay? Is everybody else okay? I'm okay with that. Now I see what you're getting at. Sure, have at it.
I have a list. Okay, so with the buffer, 50 to 10, really in almost all certainty, the property to the north is going to be residential, commercial, not rural. That's the reason they bought it, right?
Immediately to the north in
Yeah.
that portion is slated as employment regional commercial in our comp plan.
And with table 5.5, it then goes to 20 feet buffer, right? From 50 and rural to 20.
With a similar regional commercial,
Yeah.
it would not be a 20, it would just be the normal setbacks at that point. There wouldn't be a buffer requirement
Oh, okay,
from that standpoint of same zoning to same zoning.
okay. Okay, and then as far as the trees go, happily I hadn't bought trees in a while. I didn't know there was a shortage, but especially those along the north. Is it, I guess, worth, to you, worth putting a condition on that we use larger caliber trees along the north edge for buffering?
This is probably a one, have staff chime in and also the applicant. Would you agree? We're gonna get their both their thoughts on this.
Yeah, this was a staff request. The reality is even though they are smaller caliper trees, studies in experience shows that they actually grow faster and catch up to the larger caliper trees that take a little bit longer to grow. So, and we're not talking big changes. I think it was a ½ inch or something like that. And it just brings more availability to the table. And so we thought that this was appropriate, and given the quantity of materials that they're going to be seeking, we've been running into it on other projects where every time it's like, oh, we need to substitute something smaller. We can't actually get this. And so to actually achieve the thing that we're asking for, it's somewhat unachievable. So it's giving us that range there.
I guess my rationale for thinking that was, in general, that's okay if that's what you can get. Since we don't know the layout to the north, it's impossible to know. It's just, do we just be conservative and put larger trees there just because we don't know what's going there?
Well, I mean, we'd be open to a condition like that. And if you were, say, in a specific area, there's some flexibility there. I think we will need to give a chance for us to have, and maybe you give staff as a part of your condition is that we attempt to make those the larger.
Because it's just
size.
along the north of D&E.
Yeah, so like between where this project abuts to some other future development.
So commissioners, this is a good point, good time to mention. Again, obviously, we can add conditions to any of these things. So as we go along, if others of you have that, you see how the process works here. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And on the FAR, so the storage facilities, do we know the format of that? Is it 1 story, 2 story?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I'm going to ask one of my colleagues
Sure.
to come and answer that question. I do not know the format.
Or is it too early?
It's currently planned as a 3-story facility.
3-story. Okay. All right. And to reduce the FAR, you'd have to just keep going up, right?
Yeah, I mean, storage is an interesting use because what drives planning and site design is parking, if you really think about it. And storage has a very minimal parking requirement. So even though we are going 3 stories and we are putting a larger building on there, we're still going to be achieving the town's requirements for open space and landscape.
Yeah. Okay. And that was one of the questions is, I'm assuming the parking lot is smaller, so. Sure.
So to that point, and going through some of what Kevin was talking about earlier on the hotel and then height requirements, if you're saying 3 stories, that will stay, there's no variance needed to it'll stay under 40 feet.
Correct.
And 3 stories. Can we pull up, is it possible where that piece of where the storage unit would potentially?
That's not ours, no. You can pull up yours too, Kevin. So it's directly east of Costco on the northern portion of this development.
Gotcha. Is that in the D and E?
So while you're looking at that, just a question, if it's an indoor storage facility, then all entrances, so it's almost like a hotel as far as you go in and you go to each unit is enclosed
Correct.
within the bigger building.
Correct.
Okay, not familiar with those. That's just how I'm envisioning what
That's a
the
correct
descriptive
vision.
is. Yeah, okay. How many units go into that?
Or it's still planning at this
Yeah.
stage. I'm not sure. That's a breakdown on market and what they're going to be looking at for market. If they're going to be wanting to sell a bunch of 10 by 10s, 5 by 10s, 10 by 20s, and that's kind of how the unit mix is determined.
There's a couple similar units down I-25.
You're on mic. Any comments? Could please. Yeah, are you able to call up that slide?
We can come back to that while you're.
Let,
Are we trying to?
give it another, yeah.
There we go.
Nope, now we're off. Here we go.
It's the lot labeled B and E.
Okay.
Okay. Are we back to Marty?
Okay, traffic, few things on that. So just thinking about the usage, the 3 uses here. I didn't want to assume, so if we're looking at hotel, storage, and the care facility, how do those compare to like, retail traffic? My assumption is that they're lower.
You gonna take that, Eric?
Hang on a second. Who is this?
Tyler Smith with Kimley Warren. I was the traffic engineer for this project.
Okay, Eric?
I'll let
You
him
can
answer
defer.
because he's more
Okay.
familiar with specific uses.
Okay, good. Thanks. Yep, just wanted to find out who we had here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and Marty's point, I think I see where he's going here. And we'll also have either of our town engineers chime in as necessary here about traffic issues.
Yep. So the question was if mini warehouse or storage facilities, hotels and respite care would make less traffic than a commercial shopping center. And for example, a storage unit of this size, storage facility this size would generate about 9 trips during the morning peak hour and 15 trips during the afternoon, whereas a shopping center the same size would generate about 48 trips during the morning peak hour, or no, 125, sorry, I was looking at the out trips, and 450 trips during the afternoon peak hour, which if we took all the uses we have, it doesn't even hit close to those numbers.
And hotel?
Hotel we're looking at 58 trips during the AM peak hour and 74 during the PM peak hour.
Okay, and then the care facility, I would imagine would be way lower.
Care facility, there's no specific code for it. We went with medical dental office, which is the closest to a care facility. That's about 65 trips during the AM peak hour and 83 trips during the PM peak hour. So even if you add all those trips up, you're not hitting the numbers close to what a shopping center would generate.
All right, thank you.
Eric, it looks like you have something to add if you could.
What I was going to add, he has the very specific numbers for the different types of uses. So any subsequent submittal that comes in has to have an updated traffic study that shows what their now planned use is and how it compares to the master study, which just had very general uses. And as things get moving forward with each subsequent submittal, those types of reports come in to show that they're either in compliance or they're generating more traffic and the additional improvements that would be needed because they're generating more traffic. But until we get the actual submittal and see those reports, at this time, it's just an overall request.
Okay, all right, thanks. So the other thing on traffic is you know, there's obviously two very different viewpoints in the packet there. And I guess I was just wanting staff's perspective on this. You know, just the flows that you see, there's been some improvements made. Generally, the south side of Harmony on Whitesville is way less congested than the north side. You know, just with what you see, just wanting your perspective on this.
So with the annexation, the original traffic study that came in made assumptions about how much of the property would be built out at key milestones, 2025, 2035, 2040. And based on those build out projections, looked at key intersections in the area and what improvements would be needed based on both the additional traffic generated by the site and general increases in the background traffic. Background traffic numbers come from a regional traffic model that anticipates growth not just in Timnath, but in surrounding communities. Each area in a community has been assigned a projected build-out rate. So the regional model assumes these properties have been built out, and that's in the background traffic. So they take that model, they look at the 2025, and they say we're going to have 2,000 square feet of retail, 75,000 square feet of office space, 360 multifamily units, and look at what the demands on the network would be. And that's the list that they came up with of what improvements they thought would be needed by 2025 and subsequent times. Some of those improvements are needed regardless of if this development builds. And so it may not be the responsibility of this development to do. For example, one that comes up often is the intersection of Harmony and County Road 5. Their study said that that left turn lane needed to be increased in length. Their site is generating zero traffic for that left turn lane. Anybody that turns left out of the development, either going straight up 5 or turning right onto Harmony. We need to increase the length of that turn lane now. We've known about it for years. And because of that, it is on the town's capital improvement plan to build. And they may contribute something towards those costs. That's yet to be determined. But the town knows that needs to be improved. And it's not just because of this development. But there are improvements like Whitesville that this development needs to build. By 2025, it just needed to be a 2-lane road. They went ahead and built it out to the 4 lanes so they don't have to widen in the future. So each of that is looked at as each project comes in against what was anticipated and assumed to be built based on assumed build out rate.
Okay. All right.
Kind of make sense?
Yep.
Overall, okay.
And then one last thing on traffic, and if this may be too speculative, so you may not be able to answer, but with what we see, do we ever anticipate that there will be a connection out of this directly to Kector?
At this time, with what we've seen on the overall site plan, no, because of the groundwater recharge ponds that are in that area and the depth of those and the complexities. I can't say definitively yes or no, but that's the initial thought on that. Just depends on what happens as stuff builds out from the developer side.
Okay. All right. One question on the height. With the 65, I think I heard this, but that includes all of the HVAC screening and
Correct.
facades and things. Okay.
Yep.
Hey, keep running.
I think that's. Oh, sorry. One thing. On page 34, there was the changes that were specified. Just didn't want to assume this. The gray are previously, the ones highlighted in light blue are the current ones, and the ones that are kind of grayed out, those are previously approved.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're meaning the from the applicant within that. Yeah, that the gray is what's already previously been approved, and the light blue shaded was what they were proposing.
And there was one that I saw on the letter that was submitted, but I noticed it in here that wasn't on the summary, that 1.3 dot or 1.A.3.E, which is on the trees of, that change of,
Yeah, that language is just on that was the one that I mentioned is the preservation
Yeah.
of existing trees
Yeah.
to be determined. Yep.
I was trying to think, are there any? Because
There,
this isn't Sweatsville and this doesn't include the river.
no, there would be very minimal amount of trees, if anything, on the south portion of the site. On the west side, if anything, there would be a minimal amount of trees there, kind of north of the existing Connell pit. There's a row of trees that kind of run north.
Yeah.
From that standpoint, but all the other trees are not part of the annexed area along the river or down within the, around the pit and to the south of that. Those aren't part of this right now.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, who wants to next crack? Tom?
I think Marty asked all the questions I had, so I'm good.
Lisa?
Okay, I have a few questions. Most of mine fall under that criteria of number one, and just looking at it. So just in general, first, I guess I'd like to commend Ladera for looking at respite care and bringing that in. I think it's a very nice, diverse thing. It's not just shopping. It's not just people consuming. It's something that gives back to people that need, and I just commend that. I think that's a fabulous use of that area for what it's worth. A question I have on the storage facility, I do want to have a little better understanding from the developers of how that fits into that unified character that we described, that's part of our criteria to describe, is how does a storage facility, and I know it's not just individual little boxes, the indoor is different than outdoor, but how does that fit into the character of the Ladera development, providing that high quality, that feel?
Sure, I'm happy. Grant Nelson with Connell LLC. Kellen wanted me to remind myself to introduce myself. So the storage unit would sit on the northeast corner there, and part of doing development and part of doing mixed use development is bringing in these various uses and these diverse uses. And we placed it there thinking it was a good mix in the development to kind of the backside of Costco, around the roundabout. The design that has been previously submitted to the town on a pre-app is a fairly unique design. It's all interiors we talked about previous, and it has kind of a, Kevin's the planner here. It has kind of a step back design to meet the roundabout, which will be unique in character. And one piece that we're working on at Ladera is a unified set of design guidelines that we're finalizing. So all of the remainder, not floor and decor, because obviously they were first, but the rest of the project will have a unified architectural control committee and a control feel. So we hope it really does tie in. They'll have similar uses of materials and metals and finishes so that it does tie together. So that hopefully answers your question on the character.
Is it from that character though? It basically will be a building, a windowless building. I'm assuming, because you don't want people looking in your storage unit. So it's going to be very much just kind of a building that is there. How do you give that character?
They give it character, and there will be windows. Yeah, so there are windows incorporated into the facade of the building. Okay. So and unique architectural commitment, the step back around I'm doing a terrible job describing it, but the step back around the roundabout will give it a really unique feel. Steve and I met years ago. He's a planner. I'm a developer, and he's been beating into my head trying to create unique design, and actually doing a higher FAR with the lower parking ratio is kind of the highest and best use for that property in the design world and in the development world.
Well, that was my next question. As you look at it from a design standpoint, is there anything else that would be provide services for the community that is needed? Is that property unique, particularly its location to Sweatsville Zoo, floodplain, et cetera, or was it just, that corporation or that business approached you and said, boy, we'd love to have this. It seemed like it worked. Is that the best use of that? Does that property have any unique characteristics that make this the best use of it? I guess is my question.
As a developer, I think it's a great use for that property because it can take advantage of the corner entrance. It doesn't need a lot of traffic. It doesn't draw a lot of traffic. So therefore going into that site will be, beneficial to it. Having a higher, a 3-story building, I think will create visual entrance as you enter Ladera. You'll have Costco on one side and this on the other side. It'll kind of frame the rest of the development, which I think will be an attractive entrance to the development. And as Steve indicated, it will meet the open space criteria. It'll meet all the remaining criteria, even though it has a higher FAR. And these storage, there are a bunch of them up and down the Front Range that are these enclosed storage. They look like office buildings, basically.
So that was going to be my next stupid question is, because I'm not familiar with them. What kind of things are people putting into that? Are you having people hauling large couches up the chairs? Or are they just boxes of stuff? I mean, who stores things? So what kind of activity will that bring to there? Are you going to have a U-Haul backed up to it and they're emptying out the U-Haul? I don't know.
So, the largest REIT in the world is Public Storage. The Real Estate Investment Trust is Public Storage. We as Americans overconsume, which is why retail development's been great for me over the years. And then we somehow can't get rid of it. So we put it in these storage lockers. So my wife and I each have one from my mom's stuff and her mom's stuff. And we're spending way more storing it than it's ever worth, but we have to keep it. So that's their business is built on people's inability to release things. So, and they are very successful. It is the developer that's doing this is doing this in 4 different states. I'm actually business partners with them in a different development in Parker, Colorado. And they're a really good, high quality developer and they'll do a nice project here.
Kevin, excuse me, we're also, Grant, Lisa, Kevin, we're going to have a chance to evaluate this design of this building during the site plan.
Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that. It was just, again, to kind of look at it from the development, the whole character of it and things like that. I think that was all my questions relative to that. My next question would be towards the trees. And again, I think, you addressed it, but that determined to be preserved opens up in my mind the option to eliminate a lot of trees because somebody determined they weren't to be preserved. Who makes that determination of who's preserving, what trees are preserved and what are not?
So the applicant will make a request for tree removals based on the plan. And we'll evaluate those trees. Most of the trees, if any, that are on the site, which there are very few that are actually on the property, are volunteer cottonwood, small trees that have not reached maturity. So they don't have high value in sense of their value to the project unless they're in open space areas that aren't being impacted. So it'll be a conversation about what's appropriate, what's needed. And then there'll be, if there are significant trees in general, we would do some kind of request for mitigation. If there was something that was a tree worth preserving, we would say, hey, look, this tree is something we'd like to preserve. And can you work around that? And if you can't work around it, then we talk about some other mitigation by planting other trees or additional trees to support that.
But that designation of determined to be preserved is specific to this PD overlay.
To this PD overlay. Yeah.
And from the lines of where the land is, it's in a field.
There's virtually no trees.
Okay, and so there is really nothing else there. Okay.
When I look at that language, I don't think it protects anything today because there's no trees, but it's going to protect the town in the future.
Sure.
As things redevelop or as things change, it's going to give staff the ability to say, no, we want to keep that tree, or yes, you can take that tree away. So I think it's a good protection measure for the town.
Okay. Let's see.
Thanks. And if we think of anything else, Jeremy?
Yeah, a
anything?
couple. I don't want to beat a dead horse on the storage unit, but going back to Lee, I'm going to echo a lot of what Lisa said. And I think just utilization of that piece of land I mean, we're asking for 3 times allowed space for ultimately a box in a neighborhood that's supposed to be designated for community being vibrant, walkable, retail, and bringing something right back to the community. So is there a better use? Is that the only possible thing that can go in that space? And what is the total footprint? So of that land, right? Because land is one thing we can't make more of, right? So, and we only have a certain amount of it to be the staple of the entry to Timnath. So what is that? What does that look like in that space for other options? And have you guys truly vetted out if that's the best thing for the community in that area?
I'm not sure I can say we vetted out that that's the absolute best, highest and best use for that property, but it fits a lot of the criteria for it. The storage wants to be a part of the development. And if it's not on that site, it would be on a different site, maybe further south on Whitesell. The developer really likes it for this, step back design or the missing tooth design. I'm doing a terrible job describing it, but when you see the site plan, you can see it. They like it because it creates uniqueness. They actually believe this to be unique. If we put it on a square lot, it will be square. If we give them on the corner, it makes it unique. So,
okay. And then again, I know that it has nothing to do with the approval or not approval, but I'll also echo what Lisa said on respite care. I think putting that in that space is commendable. And the fact that it's going to give retail options and access to families in and out of Costco before and after without having to completely go outside to do it, I think is a great spot for it. So
yeah, we're very excited for respite.
Kudos on that one. Yeah.
Thanks. Mike, anything? Okay. One thing I heard somewhere or read in here, certainly I've heard it a couple times, is are we setting precedents by making amendments, variances, amendments, whatever? Are we setting precedents? Are we, if we approve a 65-foot building, does that mean every time something 65 feet comes along, are we approving? Staff, I'd ask you to speak to this. It's my understanding that each development proposal is considered on its own merit and against whatever criteria and whatever circumstances there are at that time and where it's located. Kevin, could you just speak to the general philosophy on whether a precedent is set legally or otherwise because we make an amendment or a variance?
Yeah, so when we as staff first received the request, for the amendment to include 65-foot high, we as staff actually requested that it be kind of designated to a certain area of the development instead of a blanket, 65-foot ask over the entirety of the property, just because, as you mentioned, that could open up for other lots in the future to have that same right, when in fact it should be kind of thought of on an individual basis as each individual, development does come through. Does that mean that in the future that this, development won't ask for any other requests? No. Does that mean that we have to grant any further requests that do come forward? No. As they mentioned, back in 2021, when they first started, not all end users were ultimately determined for the area. Now that, with this PD overlay, they start to kind of finalize those end users that they've anticipated for this first phase of the development from within that. So it doesn't necessarily set a precedent, especially because we're in a sense putting them in a box of the areas that they are, willing or wanting to do these changes. So, the FAR increase to, 1.5 is on that one certain area. It's not for the rest of the property to kind of give them a blank slate to, if it doesn't work out on that corner, that they can move it to, right next door to Floor and Decor and I-25. It doesn't allow for that. So this does, kind of put them in a box on what options they have. And that way it is kind of considered on that, case by case basis.
Okay. Thanks. Carolyn, anything you'd add about setting a precedent, legally or otherwise?
Yeah, I guess I would say that this generally would not set a precedent that you would have to require height modifications in the future. If you get another application, you'd be looking at that application anew. You'd be looking at those criteria we laid out that are in the land use code. You'd be looking at what's the surrounding neighborhood consist of. You know, what is it adjacent to residential development? Where is it located? What are the proposed uses? And so every property is very unique, and that's sort of the purpose of the PUD overlay. Is they're saying, you know, we want to have those creative, innovative uses. That's why we're proposing this. Now, that said, you have to have a reason to differentiate if someone comes in with the same request, but there will generally be a reason based on every property being different, having a lot of different facts. So you're always going to start anew, looking at the new application, looking at those criteria, and determining whether to grant a similar request should you ever receive a similar request.
Thank you. Commissioners, anything else? I have some other comments, but I'm going to save them for after we circle back for item 6B. They generally apply to both, but I'll save it for that. I echo the interest in this respite care. This is certainly something near and dear to my wife, who worked for 15 years in this field before she got into teaching. So I think that is an excellent addition to the community. Commissioners, anything else before I ask for a motion? I will say too, again, we're considering this against the land use code. We're considering in a narrow framework. We are a recommending body, making recommendations to council who can accept, reject, or amend our recommendations. Carolyn, anything else you'd add to that as we consider this?
No, I think you got it. That's perfect.
Okay, good. With that, do I have oh yeah, Marty, sure.
So
Microphone.
where did we leave the tree along the trees? That wasn't a condition, that was a direction.
It's up to you if you want it as a direction or if you want it as a condition.
I'll support it as a condition. I would support it however you want to put it forward.
So along B and E on the north, given that we know what the zoning designation is going to be, but we don't know the layout there. So we put larger trees as a buffer just in case.
And I see a head nod on, we would consider it. Carolyn White, I see you're coming up for that. Any thoughts? This was a staff recommendation.
Within reason, because it's 10 feet. You don't want to.
I guess my question would be, would you go back to what the land use code sizing is, or are you asking for something beyond that size? What the land use code, so go back to what the land use code size for that north side. Okay.
Carolyn White.
Mr. Chairman, Commission, I was coming first for that same clarification, so thank you. And then with that clarification, I just wanted to say for the record that the applicant is amenable to the proposed condition if you choose to impose it.
Thank you.
And to clarify, so when you make a motion, you could make a motion to recommend approval of, we're just talking about the planned development overlay amendment for Ladera to town council with the following conditions. And you've got the normal condition to allow non-substantive changes. And then your second condition would be along the northern border of the property to require that the caliber of the trees remain 3.5 inches to the extent feasible. Is that
Or we just said the original.
Commissioners, you good with that? I didn't hear, and along the way, in discussion, I didn't hear any other things that came close to a condition. So would you like to make a motion on this, on item 6A, the Ladera Plan Development Overlay Amendment, and state your condition as understood by and explained by staff? Certainly. Just put your mic on, please.
All right, I just want to make sure. So as far as the clarification on the approval of the extra floor space allowed is only on that one specific lot, that the storage projected storage units is going, nothing else.
That is correct.
Okay.
And the hotel.
And then the hotel.
Point
that-
one extra on the hotel.
Yep.
All right, everybody good?
Yep.
Moving forward. Okay, you want to, would you like to make a motion?
give it a
Do I have a motion?
So motion to approve item 6A, Ladera Planned Development Overlay Amendment with the condition along the north border of B and E.
So I just wanted, so the proposal for that would be what's called lot 1, block 2. Is that it's not necessarily called out as B and E, so I would specific to that and not reference B and E.
Okay,
Sorry, just wanted to get you on that one.
all right, so motion to approve 6A Ladera PD overlay amendment with the condition of we use the existing land use code on 1.A.3.E, I believe is the, or no, sorry. A different one. It's just designated as trees with no number that 1A3E. Okay.
Put your mic on, Kevin.
Sorry, it's just table 5.4
Yeah,
within.
it's just table 5.4
Yep.
trees, the existing. And Carolyn had mentioned staff working out non-substantive.
Right.
Yeah,
So the
the
second
normal.
condition is to allow staff to work with the owner applicant to address minor non-substantive modifications and unresolved comments prior to final signatures.
Did you get all that?
And that's your motion?
That's my motion.
Okay, staff, Carolyn, we okay with that? Okay, all right, do I have a second?
Second.
We have 2 seconds, pick one. All right, I believe, although I don't anticipate necessarily, but I think it would be prudent to have a roll call vote. I would remind you on this and the subsequent item, as per our protocol, if anybody has a dissent to what seems to be the prevailing vote on this, please state that for the record. That goes forward. Staff will then present that to council and indicate. But Natalie, if we could have a roll call vote on this, please.
Do you want to clarify that yes is
Yes,
approving?
yes is approval of item 6A Ladera Plan Development Overlay Amendment with the condition as stated. Thanks.
Chairperson Phil Goldstein,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jose,
Yes.
Commissioner Lisa Bard,
Yes.
Commissioner Tom Wood,
Yes.
Commissioner Jeremy Holt.
Yes.
Thank you. The amendment carries. The item 6A motion carries. All right, with that, we will repeat the process with the Ladera sketch plan. Kevin, back to you. Okay. I don't anticipate this will take too much time, so I would normally have a break. If anybody wants to take a break, we will take a very brief break. Commissioners, are we good? Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson. So this is the Ladera sketch plan. Owner Connell LLC, represented tonight by Grant Nelson, applicant Galloway Company, and I apologize, Jenny, I didn't see you over there, represented by Jenny Romano. So as I mentioned in the previous one, this is just a kind of the timeline. And as Ms. Carolyn White mentioned, this is the first step of the major subdivision process for the sketch plan. sketch plan is located similar to the previous application south of Weitzel Street on both east and or south of Sweatsville Zoo Road and east and west of Weitzel. This sketch plan is for 7 planning areas, which will be developed with commercial lots within 45 roughly of the 64 acres of the Ladera subdivision. The remaining acreage, as which was mentioned previously, is the existing Floor and Decor and Weitzel right-of-way. These planning areas range from roughly 1.78 acres to just over 9.5 acres, and then 18 acres for open space. These planning areas will be defined into individual lots at the preliminary plat stage, which is the next step in the major subdivision process. This open space will consist of just a natural open space due to the existing floodplain in the area, but they will include trails that will also connect to other existing trails and then that are in the town, such as roadside trails, and then will connect to future trails as future development occurs. The 18 acres of the total of 64 acres is 28% open space, which exceeds the regional commercial requirement of 25% in the area. And as which was mentioned before, additional open space will come at future development. Neighborhood meeting was held for this application back on February 9th for feedback from residents, and that observation report is attached. Staff did review this sketch plan against the criteria of allowing land use mix within the project will conform to the zoning map and land use map and furthers the goals of the comprehensive plan. The sketch plan is a functional system of land use and is consistent with the rationale and criteria set forth in the land use code and comp plan. And the utility and transportation design is adequate given existing and planned capacities, and then negative impacts on adjacent land uses have been identified and mitigated. And staff has found that this sketch plan meets those 4 review criteria. With that, I know presentation was already made by the applicant. If you want to hear anything else from them, or if you have any other questions from staff.
Carolyn, anything else to add? Good. We want to make sure everybody gets their money's worth tonight.
That tape that we just recorded, let's press rewind and just put that. I just would like to state and incorporate everything we just previously said, including our PowerPoint, into this record for this hearing. And that will be the full extent of our presentation.
Carolyn, Stephanie, you're comfortable with that?
Very comfortable. So noted. We'll enter it into the record. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now we have public comment. Is there anybody, Natalie, anybody wish to speak specifically on this?
I think we have 2.
Okay.
Bill Jenkins again.
Yeah, Bill Jenkins, 5507 Sugarloaf Court. I'd like to focus on one issue, specifically traffic. The Ladera traffic study is impressive, but it also does have a significant defect. Specifically, the background traffic measured in October of 2020 or March of 21 is an underestimate of true background traffic due to COVID-related shutdowns. Larimer County traffic station data indicate between 35 to 55% decrease in traffic at numerous measured traffic stations in 2020 versus 2018. An example, Station 58, located on County Road 5 near Kector Road, shows a 55% decrease from 2018. You can see the chart in your packet. In the short term, the Ladera traffic study calls for 6 important road / traffic improvement measures needed by 2025. That's 18 months from now. 2 of which Ladera has completed, both within the Ladera project itself, currently on a private road. Two others will improve access at Harmony and Wetzel. One, a traffic signal at County Road 5 and Kechter is needed to maintain acceptable LOS at that intersection. The other improvement is at a critical intersection of Harmony and County Road 5 that requires extending the stacking lane to 204 feet and adding a transition lane of 180 feet. You can see the LSC figure depicting that. This last improvement will likely be expensive due to required modifications to the County Road 5 Poudre River Bridge. This is a critical improvement, as the LSC letter indicates. Not lengthening this lane will result in capacity issues at this intersection and likely shift of trips to Weitzel Street, which has little, if any, additional capacity to accept these trips. There is already evidence that this intersection is in trouble by virtue of the fact that large backups are occurring on some afternoons. My question is, when will these be designed and implemented, and who is paying for them? I'm concerned that the low background traffic counts from 2020 underestimate the timing need for these 2025 improvements just 18 months from now. I'm also concerned that numerous improvements called for in the Ladera study that are needed by 2035 and 2040 will in fact be needed much sooner. We need updated current background traffic counts at the critical intersections around Ladera that accurately define current traffic and a solid plan for road improvements that includes planning, timing of improvements, and a plan for who will be paying for these improvements. The last thing Timnath needs is multiple new Walmart-like traffic problems.
Thanks, Bill. Even though we didn't have our lights on, you kept it right to 3 minutes there. Thanks. Natalie, we have somebody else.
Irv Christie.
Hi, name is Irvin Christie, 5821 River Bluff Drive. Because there have been so many letters back and forth between Ladera and the Guided Growth team, I just wanted to call your attention to the fact there is a second letter from Guided Growth Attorney James Silvestro, who submitted it to the town on July 12th, 2023. And this letter raises new issues regarding inaccurate estimates of the current background traffic as the Kinley Horn study was completed during COVID shutdown. The letter also includes full details from the LSC transportation consultants detailing those infrastructure improvements that Bill just mentioned. And although there are two of the improvements have been completed on private property, there are no plans in place to address the other needed road improvements at this time. We all want Ladera to be successful, and that requires, smooth in and out traffic through the development. The second item is also regarding traffic related to the neighborhood meeting that was conducted in June. And we all agree that in order for the vision to be realized, there must be that smooth traffic flow in and out the development. During that neighborhood meeting related to PD overlay amendment number 1, most of the discussion centered around the traffic study and the traffic in and out of the development area. The citizens made a request to conduct a separate public meeting specifically just on traffic. And that was noted in the notes that came out of that meeting. However, there was nobody who took the ownership to actually set up that meeting. And so we'd like to specifically request that there is a public meeting between Ladera traffic engineers, Timnath engineers, and the citizens to actually understand some of these issues in more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Irv. Anybody else?
Oh, I'm sorry. One other thing, Guided Growth is definitely in favor of the respite care. So I just wanted to make sure that was on record as well.
Thank you. That was nice of you. Appreciate it. Natalie, anybody else?
Nope.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak, offer public comment that didn't sign up? Nope. All right. We will now close public comment. Okay. Now, I think we have a couple people champing at the bit here, right? Don, it's champing at the bit is the expression about the traffic issue. Eric, Don, the traffic engineer, your call, Carolyn White, who do you want to have address some of these traffic issues?
I'd be pleased to let staff go first, and then we can chime in with anything that is different from the applicant's perspective.
Okay, Eric.
In regards to the 2020 traffic volumes of the counts being done at that time, I will have their traffic consultant address that here later. That was discussed during the initial review of that report. And again, that was just initial background traffic numbers, but they used the regional model to look at what the background traffic numbers would be in 2025 in the future. So that was a starting point, but it was addressed in comments way back when the original report was reviewed. Again, like I mentioned last time, the 2025 recommended improvements were based on an assumption that the property developed at a certain rate, had certain amount, several 100,000 square feet of retail in place, residents, whatnot, to trigger those improvements. When Floor and Decor came in, the improvements that are currently built, Weitzel, more than needed to be done, and the roundabout were improvements tied to that project as a minimum improvements that needed to be done to support that one plan that came in at the time. As future plans come in, construction plans for future plans come in, improvements that are needed to support that level of build out will be included as part of that submittal for review.
Thanks. Are you going to have Carolyn as your traffic engineer? Got anything to add to that?
And while they do that, commissioners, just a point of clarification, Weitzel Road, even though it was first developed as a private road, has been turned over to the ownership of the town, Timnath. So the town does have the ownership of Weitzel.
And it's my understanding that the town, and from attending council meetings going back a long time, the town was prepared to pay for that road. And now Ladera has done that.
At the time of Floor and Decor, the road wasn't even required per the traffic study, but we would not allow it to go forward with a single access only because the frontage road had been closed by CDOT at that time. So it was a requirement to get it pushed all the way through to County Road 5 as part of that development.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may add, I'm going to turn the mic over to our traffic engineer in just a second to answer some of the questions on a technical level. But something I want to say more broadly about traffic generally, and I think that Mr. Furman hit on it, and that is, first of all, there are certain points in your process in the code where the traffic study is generated, it's required, and it's used to analyze the proposal that's in front of you. That happens at annexation with the master traffic study that we performed, and it will happen again with the subsequent annexation. And then as to each individual improvement that's going to be required to be built and how much of that the developer has to pay for is determined at a later point in the process when you have an actual site plan proposal, development plan in front of you, just like was just summarized. And so as was described, those traffic improvements and the estimated phasing of when they would be required was based on certain assumptions about when build out would occur, not only build out within Ladera, but build out within the immediate vicinity in the town. And there's no magic about 2025 or 2035 or 2045 if those assumptions don't hold true, right? So we right now at this point in time are way behind where we thought we would be in terms of how much build out would actually have occurred. And that is one reason why some of those improvements have not yet been triggered, because the individual development plans that would trigger them have not yet come forward. If this is approved, then we go to the next step, the preliminary plat, and then we go to the final plat, and then we can do individual site plans for those individual projects. And then the requirements will kick in where the town will require through a subdivision improvement agreement that certain improvements be constructed. So from the perspective of a citizen who would like to see more traffic improvements constructed faster to solve the existing deficiencies that exist in this vicinity, the best thing that could happen is for these applications to get approved so that we can move forward and get to the point where that is actually required. So I just wanted to kind of say that big picture from a broad perspective, because we keep hearing these concerns about traffic. And as you can see, Ladera has already demonstrated that it is willing and has in fact built more traffic improvements than are required to accommodate its own demand in order to try to help facilitate some of these problems. And I'm sure there will be continued dialogue between staff and Ladera about that as it moves forward.
Carolyn, before we bring the traffic engineer gentleman up, anything else that was said there during public comment, the brief, admittedly brief public comments in terms of numbers, anything else that you needed to address?
No, the only thing we want to address is those COVID traffic counts, and Tyler Smith is going to introduce.
Okay, Tyler.
I'm Tyler Smith with Kimley Horn. So in terms of the northbound left turn lane at the County Road 5 and Harmony Road, this project is not anticipated to contribute any traffic to that movement. As spoken to earlier, some of the improvements are based on background growth and the volumes that'll be on there just based on the town growing. In terms of the COVID adjustments, we considered that, looked at the historical data, and based on the comparison, the traffic volume in the study area was right on par without the COVID adjustments. This was worked out with the town of Timnath.
Anything else?
I guess in terms of funding for the improvements, this will be discussed in the future between the developer and the town.
Okay, staff, you concur with that? Eric, you concur?
Yeah.
I presume.
Yeah, I mean, the discussions regarding the COVID counts were several years ago, so I don't remember the specifics. I remember it was a point that was brought up and discussed, and it was looked at baseline counts and how they compared. But because the future projections used our model that didn't have the COVID in, we weren't concerned with what was being proposed for future conditions.
Okay, stay there for a minute, Tyler. All right, I'm going to bring it up here. I think we've addressed, Carolyn, Steffel, we've addressed the public comment. I'm going to bring it up here to the commissioners now. Questions, comments, and maybe we can start if anybody wants to stay on traffic. If not, we'll move on to anything else anybody wants to bring up. Anybody on? We have traffic engineer up there and we got Eric on the mic as well. So anything on traffic? If not, no? Okay.
The only
All right.
question I had is, and you just answered it, the 2025 projections were not based on a model that included the COVID.
It uses background traffic for the whole region.
Yeah.
Based on what was projected for 2025. And those regional models are not static. They are updated about every 5 years, just like our transportation master plan is being updated. It's a 2015 plan that was going to be updated in 2020. There's a reason we didn't. It's currently in process right now, and that will move all of those marks forward. It takes a look at, did stuff over the last 8 years, in this case, build out of the projections that we intended, and then it resets that going forward.
Lisa, I believe you had a question on regarding traffic.
Just a very brief comment. Traffic is always going to be an issue around here. I mean, frankly, if you build it, they will come and they are coming. So it's going to be a problem. I guess I just want acknowledgement of the citizens who have asked for a continuing dialogue. Let's not let this one rest. Let's be diligent. Let's do our job and do the best we can to mitigate a huge problem.
And regarding the left turn at Harmony Main and when that is planned, it has been in the town's capital improvement plan established by council. With the design for that is starting in 2025. Construction started to 2026 start. That's been established for years before even the Ladera project came on board.
Marty, I think you had something to add to this. I'll let you
There
carry
was
it.
one comment there I didn't want to lose. There was a request, is kind of playing off what Lisa said. There was a request to have a traffic meeting on this at some point to ask questions and things like that. I just didn't want that to get lost to consider. That's not ours to decide.
That's Don, are you,
I'll
Don,
jump on
and
that
maybe
one.
Carol and Steffel. I'm glad you backed that because we don't want to gloss that over. You want to comment on that?
No, but I will. Yeah, I heard the comment, I understand, and we will try to accommodate that during the normal progression of the review of the development.
Would that be addressed in the neighborhood meeting for the next little?
I guess I took it as not specific to this, but a general.
Yeah, I would
discussion.
broaden it to
Yeah.
the regional kind of,
Yeah.
and not necessarily Ladera.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, because I think that'll accomplish what everybody's looking for.
That would
And-
certainly
and
be a
to
good idea.
acknowledge the request from citizens who want to know more about traffic as an ongoing issue. not just set it aside to, okay, we'll address it when this happens.
No.
Or when these benchmarks are met, but maybe the,
From,
and again, it's outside of our purview as planning commissioners, but maybe it's something
Sure.
that
From
needs to
the-
be done.
We're in the middle of the update of the master traffic study for the town. And I think as part of that, there's some outreach milestones that we're going to be coming to. And I think we can accommodate what they're asking for.
And to Lisa's point, whether it is or isn't outside our purview, given the impact and the considerable discussion, it might be something, again, if staff and our attorneys agree to at least make some kind of presentation to Planning Commission, it would be helpful to us going forward with similar issues.
No, and I think, from staff's perspective, I think education on this particular subject is absolutely critical. And I think we're all over that in terms of wanting to have more education.
Matt?
So just so I want to emphasize what Don said a minute ago. We are going through a transportation master plan update right now. We're moving into dialogue that is going to be outreach to the community. We're going to have potential public open house kind of things, engagement. That's the exact place for this conversation to happen, because it'll talk about not just this project, it'll talk about townwide transportation improvements and transportation projections. It actually is kind of a great timing. And so it wouldn't be a one-off meeting that's specific to this project. It would be more of a global conversation, but that conversation will be a part of that, is what my
Well,
expectation is.
I think there was a comment made in the package that we had. It's not necessarily the developer's responsibility to fix the city's problems that were created in a development that happened long before they came. So it really has to be a big picture, look at the whole thing, be transparent. I'm all for it. I think that's wonderful.
Well
Yeah.
said. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and I can't help myself. One more thing here. I mean, I know we characterize this as a problem, and I don't discount the fact that it's a problem, but it's a good problem. I mean, we got a lot of people coming, we got active retail, we got active development, and that's what communities want.
Okay, we're up front here. Anything else on traffic? Anything else, period? Marty?
Two questions, quick ones. The roundabout, the east exit from there. That looks like it will only ever go as far as those two lots there. It's not going to go into the open space.
Correct. It'll end at the east line of those two proposed planning areas.
Good. And then just confirming that, so there's a little reservoir as part of the open space?
Yep. Yeah, that is part of the overall requirement for
Yeah.
drainage for the subdivision.
Okay, yeah, I like that. That's kind of a nice buffer as you get closer to the river.
Yep.
Anything else? Tom?
Yeah, I really applaud the 18 acres of open space in the reservoir. I think that's great, and I think it's a great amenity. But I did see that some of this is going to be in the 100-year floodplain. Is there grading plans or so forth to try to protect those properties, or what's the plan?
Eric?
The property has been going through a conditional letter of, they already went through a conditional letter of map revision to be able to move all of their developable properties out of the floodplain per FEMA and state requirements. They have completed the grading. I don't know if they've completed all of it yet. They've completed it for this site one plan. They actually have a LOMR letter of map revision to document those changes before FEMA right now. That was for the western part of the site. They're working on a second one for the east. So yes, it's aware of where those floodplains, floodways are, and it's being addressed per the review process to the feds to revise the site and move those lines and move the properties up above those water surface elevations.
Great. If that's the intent, that's super. I think we want to make sure that the care facility is not going to be underwater. That's all the comments I have.
Okay for the storage facility and the others, everything else, but as long as
Let's protect the care facility.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Other comments, Commissioners? Jeremy, anything? Mike? Lisa, Marty? Okay. I've got to kind of wrap this up, both items, business items. I got one question with maybe a follow-up and then one comment. Kevin, how long has it been that anybody who was considering moving here could have found out that this was destined to be a commercial area? This was part in our growth management area. This was in the comprehensive plan in one form or another. How long has it been that that's been?
So a majority of this property was included in what we characterize as the initial comp plan for the town, which was back in about 1984. Was a majority of this property included in that. There was an update in 2002, which included all of the property and subsequent properties around it, to where at that point in 2002, the entirety of this property was designated for an employment regional commercial type venture, just because of the intersection of Harmony and I-25. Making it that. So from a regional commercial standpoint, it's been, over 20 years that it's been slated this way. And our most recent comp plan back in 2020 continued that. So yeah, it's been at least 20 years that something has been slated for commercial for this property.
My point being that, and thanks, I appreciate it. I didn't realize it had even been that long. As I recall, that 2000 census, there were 323 people in Timnath, something like that.
It's probably about.
So
right.
Essentially, everybody that has moved here had every opportunity to know that there was going to be commercial, regional commercial in this location. The other, and the comment I would make, we moved here 13 years ago. We live on a side street. We've had lots of snowfalls, large and small, and never once has our street been plowed. And every time it snows, and I've been involved with Planning Commission for 12 years, every time it snows, my wife says, why isn't our street plowed? And certainly I always tell her, that's the town's responsibility. That's not the development's responsibility. And I said, it takes sales tax revenue to have more snow plows and more people to drive those snow plows. And then she follows up with, as she will, well, where are you every Tuesday night? And I say, that's not within my purview. My point here is that businesses, and I've learned this in my involvement here, businesses don't come until there's enough rooftops. And so it's inevitable. And if we're going to have in this town to keep a great little town moving forward, we have to have sales tax. People have the well-crafted surveys have shown that people want they want parks and open space. They want 24/7 police coverage. And I know my wife certainly wants eventually our street to be plowed. And so I know we need sales tax revenue. I know also that the property tax revenue is less than 1%, I believe, something like that for the town. So we do need more sales tax, and Walmart and Costco alone can't do it. So that's my soapbox on why I believe we need commercial. And I also know that we're not going to please all the people all the time with what particular retail businesses or what sales tax generating businesses we need. So unless commissioners have any other questions or comments, I'd like to have a motion on business item 6B, the Ladera sketch plan.
I move to recommend the approval of their sketch plan, allowing staff to work with the owner applicant to address minor non-substantive issues.
Thanks, Lisa. Do I have a second?
Second.
Natalie, once again, I don't think it's necessary, but let's, for the record, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairperson.
And to what Marty's about to ask, a yes vote is in support of item 6B. Thank you.
Chairperson Phil Goldstein.
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jose.
Yes.
Commissioner Lisa Vard.
Yes.
Commissioner Tom. Wood.
Yes.
Commissioner Jeremy Holt.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Developers. Thanks, staff. Reports. Commissioners, I have one item. Does anybody have? Matt knows exactly what I'm going to mention. Anybody? Okay, I have a very important thing to discuss. Pickleball. Okay. Right now, we believe on August 3rd, we will have a grand opening for our phase 3 of our terrific community park. And I have been charged with council with having some pickleball competitions near and dear to my heart. Certainly, I am currently missing 2 staff members that I'm hoping to corral into this to make this thing happen. So unless you're chicken and pickle, that may be something for Ladera, Grant, certainly. But in any event, I'm just getting this on the record for the entire world to hear while we're still out there, that I do need the 2 designated staff members, and you know who you are, to sign up for some lessons, because this is not like riding a bicycle. All right. So okay, I'll need 2 warm bodies to make this thing happen. Okay, any commissioners, anything else? Staff, anything else for the? Are we going to have, we will have a meeting. All right, commissioners, anything else? All right, I need a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good meeting.